Welcome to Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
Yep, and I'm your cohort in crime here, Quin, K8QS. What's the topic, Tom?
The topic today, Quin, is yours and mine gateway, the gateway drug into ham radio, which was AM radio DXing.
Broadcast band
With our little crystal sets, waiting for WTMJ to sign off at sunset so we could DX anywhere, KOA, anything, please, but a local station.
Yeah, right.
But, the status nowadays of AM broadcast band, it's called medium wave or just abbreviated MW DXing in 2026 is still a fascinating mix of traditional ionospheric physics, advanced digital signal processing, and a high-stakes legislative battle to keep the medium alive.
Yeah, that's interesting, Tom. You mentioned to me the other day with your IC 7300, I think it was the first time that you went on the broadcast band, maybe in the evening or at night, and you broadened your band pass, so
right.
Bandwidth, so you could really get some of this DXing going. And it's amazing with a good antenna what you can do with a 7300 compared to what we did when we were growing up, or before we became hams, and we did AM DXing. It didn't take much of a radio. You could have a little transistor radio from Sears Roebuck, which is what I had. You could do it from your family's traditional plastic case AM radio that was usually on top of the refrigerator. And in Chicago, where we grew up with my family, it was always WGN 720 on the dial, and Wally Phillips was on there.
Right.
So and then if you do it at night, you're going to hear signals that are not close, because a lot of the close stations have to shut down, and you get these clear channel stations from distances.
Right.
And car radios from the beginning were often quite good on the AM broadcast band. So if you're out at night and you want to impress your date and you get that radio on there and you tune in, what was the station down in, was it in, it was in Louisiana, I think, that played rock music.
WOR.
WOR was New York. WOR was New York. There was another one down. Somebody will post a note down below. I can't remember the call letters or the frequency, but it was down in New Orleans, and they were playing hot, hot meaning popular songs. So I also, Tom, used a World Radio TV handbook, which they used to make. I don't think they make it anymore. It was a sucker. It was fairly thick. Yeah. And it listed all the stations on all frequencies, so I could go in there, and while I was tuning around, and I would hear call letters real quickly, and I'd look in there to see which one it was, and I would check off all of the stations around the country that I had heard at one time or another, including those from Chicago that I heard on the other side of the Mississippi, not just even into Denver was KOA. But then you had other stations out in Los Angeles and all. It was great fun.
Right. And I find the car radios had to be engineered to be unsusceptible to local noise, static, and their tuning system was different. They used ferrite slugs in coils rather than using a traditional capacitance tuning. So I think that made a big difference as far as their ability to get DX stations at night. But there's not that much localized AM radio at night beyond the daily drive times. You've got the syndicated shows, the politics, the sports, so on and so forth. The syndication kind of drives me nuts because you hop from one frequency to the other, and it's the same broadcast. It's all syndicated, okay?
Yeah. You think of that with Art Bell, when Art Bell used to be on. He was on so many stations, you'd tune across the band, and you'd get him on 30 stations on one night.
Right. But at night, the programming changes. And It's more localized programming. You get some local, high school sports and stuff like that. You get localized news rather than the syndicated stuff they
Yeah.
feed out to you. There's one station in Toronto
Oh, yeah.
uh, plays classical music, jazz. Um, it's a real interesting format. But yeah, at nighttime, AM radio gets real interesting.
It sure does. So here's a breakdown of the current landscape, just to give you a little bit of background on this. Go ahead, Tom, with our first point.
Okay, well, the science remains the same whether you're in ham radio or AM broadcast DXing. The foundational physics of medium wave propagation are, unchanged. During daylight hours, the highly active D layer of the ionosphere completely absorbs these frequencies, limiting communication to ground wave propagation. That's typically 50, if you're lucky, 150 miles, depending on the soil conductivity of the transmitter. As the sun sets, though, the D layer dissipates, allowing AM signals to reach the higher F layer and refract back down to Earth. The nighttime skywave allows powerful stations to bounce signals for hundreds or thousands of miles, rapidly filling the radio dial with distant voices.
Yeah, and the Federal Radio Commission, the predecessor to the FCC, and then the FCC in 1934 when it was founded and beyond, they knew this, and so a lot of the licensed stations have to shut down, and some of them have to use directional antenna so they don't interfere with other stations which are allowed to use higher power on the same frequency. So it's a crazy mesh that changes from daytime to evening. Let me talk secondly about the software-defined radio revolution. The methodology of medium wave DXing has shifted. While many still enjoy spinning the old VFO dial, on their radio, the most serious DXers have moved beyond to computer-based setups. Full band recording. Operators can utilize SDRs to record the entire FM broadcast spectrum as a single massive IQ data file. It's wild. You can time shift DXing. DXers run these wideband recordings at the top of the hour when stations broadcast their legal IDs, because that's the time typically, or half on the hour. Or if they were going into a news broadcast, they would say who they were, plugging themselves. They can spend the next day visually combing through this digital waterfall display, analyzing the frequencies and pulling out weak stations. There's also diversity phasing. Because the band is heavily congested, many operators use dual antenna arrays and phasing hardware or software-based cancellation to steer deep electronic nulls. This allows them to effectively cancel out a dominant local station to hear weak, distant signal hiding on the same frequency.
Right, and then you also have the rising noise floor. The most significant technical challenge for modern DXers is the relentless increase in the localized noise floor.
Oh, boy.
Modern residential environments are filled with switching power supplies, LED lighting, signal electronics that emit severe RF interference across the medium wave band. To combat this, many DXers utilize magnetic loop antennas, which are highly directional and far less susceptible to local electrical noise than traditional long wire antennas.
Yeah, that's great, Tom. And the fourth point is about the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act. We're talking about the legislation now on a macro level. That's the big picture. The survival of the AM broadcast band itself has recently become a major legislative issue. Several EV electric vehicle manufacturers have begun removing AM radios from the car dashboards, arguing that electric motors generated too much unshielded interference for the radios to be usable. In response, lawmakers introduced this AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act, which has gained massive bipartisan momentum. Through 25 and now into 2026, the legislation seeks to mandate the inclusion of AM receivers in all new vehicles, highlighting the band's irreplaceable role in what has been called the National Emergency Alert System, beep, 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 EAS, due to its massive resilient skywave coverage footprint. For the DX community, I would say, Tom, this act is incredibly important, keeping AM radios in cars, is vital to maintaining the daily listenership required to keep medium wave broadcast stations economically viable and transmitting, so they're there even if we're going to do nighttime DXing.
Well, localized AM broadcasting is very important too during localized emergencies, because
Right.
sometimes it's the only broadcast medium you have available to you to find out specifically what's going on in your area. And we can't imagine that manufacturers would dump AM radios in cars, but maybe with Sirius satellite FM station, especially Spotify and the like, it could happen. I wouldn't
Yes.
like to see it happen.
Right.
But,
neither would I. So what's happening, of course, with all the smartphones and all that stuff is more and more young people are making their own, they're programming their own station. They put on their device what they want, and then they just feed that through the speakers in the car. So a friend of mine was teaching, began a new course in radio, and he asked his college students which of the local radio stations or what kinds of music they like to listen to on the radio, AM or FM stations. Not a single student in his class listened to AM or FM. They all were using their smartphones and the like to program their own stuff. So what's going to happen here, we don't know. We're hoping that AM radio stays around. We're hoping that the electrical vehicle manufacturers will invest a little bit more to make sure that those radios are relatively noise-free. And we want to see it continuing because we grew up with, as a lot of you did, with AM DXing. It's a fun thing to do. So this is Ham Radio Perspectives. If you like what we're doing here, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with other people. Tell us your tales of AM DXing and all in the comments down below. I'm Quin, K8QS.
I'm Tom, W89TDD.
73, everybody. Thanks for listening in.